All righty, mamayang gabi sa inyo tanan-tanan. Good evening, good evening. How we doing this fine evening? Not too bad. Let's pick up our Bible study in the book of Proverbs chapter 26. Now you'll recall, the book of Proverbs is known for its Hebrew poetry. Now poetry, as we've seen so often in both Psalms and Proverbs, does not speak of rhyming sounds. This is rhyming ideas. Your key words are always but, contrasting, and, comparison, or even, we're going to see a lot of them tonight, like or as, where you're building upon, where you're taking two ideas and tying them together. But we had seen in the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs, this wisdom given to the son of Solomon. We presumed that it was Rehoboam, the one who would ultimately take the throne after Solomon. But then beginning in chapters 10 all the way through chapter 24, you have these individual words of wisdom that Solomon was passing down. Now we admit that there is some controversy regarding this wisdom because after all it is Solomon. And Solomon did not per se end very well. At the end of his life, according to 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 4, kalayo sa Ginoo, kay damo iyang mga asawa, he walked away from the Lord. But remember that this is not his wisdom. This is God's wisdom that he happened to pass through Solomon. Solomon was just the tool. This is not his understanding. This is not his insights. These are God's truths given to Solomon that Solomon wrote down, but they are true to this very day because they are from the Lord. Which is why, beginning in chapters 25 through 29, you still have the wisdom of Solomon written down, but not by him. Some 300 years later, dugay na, King Hezekiah, one of the righteous good kings of the southern kingdom of Judah, came along and found additional proverbs. They were written by Solomon, but they were not included in the book. And he added them. Why did he add them? Because they are God's wisdom. Because they are timeless truths. That they were true in the days of Solomon. They were true 300 years later in the days of Hezekiah. And hasta subang, they are still true to this very day. So we pick up this evening in chapter 26 as we come to the second of these chapters dealing with the wisdom of Solomon written by Hezekiah. And they're broken down into 3 key sections, 3 divisions this evening. In verses 1 through 12, we're going to first of all talk about wisdom for fools. And you're going to see this word fool come up quite frequently. Now the first one is that do not be surprised by a fool. Look at verse 1. As snow in the summer and rain in the harvest, so honor is not fitting for a fool. So, simply na lang, if it is summertime, which, let's be honest, we're in the Philippines. It's always summertime. It's always going to be hot here. It's never getting a big cold time of year. So if it's warm out, if it's hot out, do you expect it to ever snow? Of course, if it ever snowed in the Philippines, I'm convinced of this. People would just die. They would not know what to do. Once the temperature got down to 0 degrees, they would just literally probably fall over and die because they'd never felt something so cold in all of their life. There's never going to be snow in the Philippines. Don't be surprised and shocked when it does not snow. Amuman. When it's the time of the harvest, dito sa Israel, wala ulan. It never rains. It's a dry season in Israel. In the same way, do not be surprised when a fool does not live a good, godly life. For the very nature of a fool is someone who does not follow after God. We had a situation just this past week where a family member should have stepped out and done something, should have helped out, and they did not. And ang iba sa mga tao sa pamilya, they were kind of upset about this, by the way. They were quite frustrated that this family member, they said, didn't help us when they should have. And I said, well, does this family member know Jesus? No. Wala kilala sila si Jesus. Well, then why would you be surprised, regardless of who they are, family or not, if they don't know Jesus, they're not going to do things that are godly and that are right. Of course they're not. To expect them to do so is like saying, I think it's going to snow in the Philippines. It's just not going to happen. Do not be surprised when a fool does things that show they do not have a relationship with the Lord. And a fool needs to be taught a hard lesson. Look in verses 2 through 3. Like a flitting sparrow, like a flying swallow, so is a curse without cause that shall not alight. A whip to the horse, a bridle for a donkey, and a rod for the back of a fool. So, the point is this. Kung ang mga tao, ungot sila, if they're foolish, then that means that they do not, by the way, know God. They do not have a relationship with God. As a result, it is very hard to teach them. They do not want to learn godly lessons. You can try to give them wisdom, try to speak to them and give them insights. It's like a little sparrow that lands on their shoulder and then flies away. They quickly forget it. It has no impact. If you've ever had, let's put it this way, a fly that wants to get around your head. They're really annoying. You know, the little langaw and lapit sa imo ulo, and they're buzzing around. You just kind of swat them away, but you don't think about them. You just kind of go away, leave me alone. This is wisdom to a fool. They don't pay attention. They're swatting it away. They're saying, just leave me alone. I don't care what you're telling me. Well, so how do you teach a fool? Like a whip to a horse, like a bit in the mouth of a stubborn donkey, it takes a rod to beat a fool in order for them to learn a lesson. This is kind of heavy, but it makes some sense. The idea is this. The preference of God is to try to gently get our attention. He wants to whisper in our ear. He'd love for us to listen to Him. Pero kung wala pa mati sa iya, then God has no problem breaking out the rod. Are we saying that God will give us a hard time? Yes, indeed. What will God do? Whatever is necessary. There is no limit to how far God will go to get our attention. Go back to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 6. The Lord literally beats those He calls His children. Why? Because it's the only way sometimes we learn. And it's too important to learn a lesson for us to miss it, and God will do anything for us to get it. He doesn't make a difference if He has to make that we have no finances, we have sickness, whatever it takes, God will do it to get our attention. The fool, if it takes a rod, God will use it to let him learn. But that brings us to the third thing we want to note regarding the fool, and that's in verses 4 through 5. And that's that we are not to answer them. This gets confusing, so bear with me. For we're told, do not answer a fool when he is being foolish, lest you become like him. But look at verse 5. Make sure to answer a fool when he is foolish, lest he be wise in his own eyes. If you're reading closely and you're paying attention, you ought to be raising your hand right now and going, wait a minute. He just contradicted himself. He said, do not answer the fool. Because if we answer the fool, we're going to their level. If they're saying dumb things, doing dumb things, and we react to those dumb things, we're going to be as dumb as they are. So he's saying, leave them alone. Let them just be dumb. But when they're doing dumb things, we ought to go and tell them they're doing dumb things, because otherwise they won't learn not to do dumb things. So which one is it? Do we answer them or do we not answer them? Yes. It depends. This comes down to discernment. We need to know why are they being foolish. Kaya iban sa mga tao, pasiwagit sa ila, they're being foolish, they're being dumb, because they have no interest in the things of the Lord. If someone is rebellious in their heart, they're uninterested in the things of God, pawala ang sa ila, don't even give them a time of day. Because they're not going to listen, they're not going to want to listen, you just got to walk away from them and let God get a hold of them. But, if someone is being foolish, pero ang gusto sila masunod sa Ginoo. They have a heart that says, I'm trying to do what's right. I do want to live a righteous life. That's someone we want to come alongside and encourage, exhort, correct, because they have a heart ultimately that desires to be close to God. We must have discernment. Know why someone is a fool. Hard-hearted? Go back to 2 Timothy 2:23. Do not have anything to do with the foolish. Broken-hearted? Hey, we come alongside and we minister to them. So know who it is, know why they are doing what they're doing, and be wise in how we respond to them. But that brings us to a fourth thing we want to note in regards to fools, and that's in verse 6. And that's that they're not dependable. For look what Solomon says. He who sends a message by the hand of a fool cuts off his own feet, and he drinks poison. So, quite literally, Kung depende sa mga tao, I don't know, is it okay to say, that makes sense, the fool? I want to be careful with that one. I don't want to be offensive, but, someone who's just, pasuwagid. If someone is just not interested in the Lord, which is what a fool means, by the way, that word in the Hebrew, kasil, it means someone who is foolish, is someone who has no interest in the things of God. If you depend upon that person, you are cutting off your feet from underneath you. You are drinking poison. In other words, you are only going to harm yourself by where you're putting your confidence. I've got to be honest. I don't like plastic chairs. I'm wary of them. The cheap Chinese plastic chairs, every time I sit down, I wonder, is it going down? Because anybody over 100 kilos, and I'm over 100 kilos, just to be clear, anyone over 100, they're not built for that. They're not made for that. And if you sit in them, you take your life in your hands, you very well might end up on the floor. And I've seen it happen more than once. Fortunately, I have not had it happen recently. I've seen it happen. I remember a gentleman here in the church a couple of years ago found a nice plastic chair over the aisle, and he sat down. He was on the ground the next second. It just happens. Big boys, not meant for those plastic chairs. But here's the point. You ought to know better. If you know the chair is not built for you, don't sit on it. If you know a fool is not dependable, don't rely upon them. Do not put your confidence in someone who does not walk with Jesus Christ, because if you do, you cut off your feet. You're drinking poison. You're only going to harm yourself. No, they are a fool. For ikalima, the fifth thing we note in verses 7 through 9 is the fools are useless. They genuinely are useless. And we're given 3 examples to epitomize that truth. Like legs on a lame man that hang limp, so is a proverb in the mouth of a fool. Like one who binds a stone or gets a stone stuck in a sling, he's he who gives honor to a fool. Like a thorn that goes into the hand of a drunkard, that's a proverb in the mouth of a fool. All of which to say, fools are useless. How useful are legs on a lame man? Kung may isa katao, hindi palalaka, if his legs are not working, how good are his legs? They're dead weight. They're not useful. They're actually more of a hindrance. He has to carry them around. They don't carry him around. That's a fool. They do not have any purpose. Amoman, if you've got a sling, you're ready for battle. You're going to war. Mind you, in the days of the Bible, your slings, they were not slingshots. Not tirador. It was different looking. Rather than having tirador, you had these little pieces of cloth that you would set your stone inside of. And you would spin it as hard and as fast as you could and release one side to cause the stone to fly. But how effective was it if your stone got stuck inside of your sling? It'd come back and hit you. It didn't help, it harmed, it did you damage, because that's a fool. They don't help you, they harm you. Amoman, if you have a drunk man, kung hubog kid isa katao, and you put something sharp in his hand, what's he going to do with that thing that's in his hand? Hubog siya. Is he going to recognize there's danger? He's not going to know any difference. He probably won't even realize, may pila siya, he gets cut, because he's a fool. And this is the idea. No matter what, fools are useless. Therefore, be careful about putting your confidence and trust in them. Jesus would say this same truth. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 6, he said, do not cast your pearls before pigs. Don't take something that's precious, something that's very important to you. Do not take the truths even that God has given to you and toss them out before foolish people in the world. Why? Because they don't want them. Understand, this is the problem. Remember that a fool, the definition of a fool, it's someone who does not want God. And if someone does not want God and you're trying to give them God and they don't have that heart for the Lord, they're not going to treat you well. They're going to ignore what you say. They may even come back and attack you for your words. So we need to be wise and understand who to talk to. Do not depend upon a fool, for they are by their very nature useless. For Hebrews chapter 4 verse 2 tells us, the word that you give them won't be mixed with faith. Therefore, it has no power. They do not want it, therefore will not help them. Which is why we don't hire them. Look at verse 10. Do not hire a fool. Now I'm going to read you this in the New King James Version, but I need to give you the heads up. The interpretation is going to sound very different because this is actually quite a challenging verse. The New King James Version says, "The great God who formed everything gives the fool his hire and the transgressor his wages." Give the blank stares because that makes no sense. Let me see if I can't help you understand what this means. It is, by the way, depending on your translation, going to look very different. If you read this in the New Living Translation, "Akon ang pulang sang Diyos." If you read this in the NIV, it's going to say something entirely different. When you have vastly different interpretations from one translation to another, what it tells you is that the original language, medyo kabulay na kantiende. It's hard to understand. But the closest thing we can get is this, and I think it's a pretty easy answer. Anyone who hires, and that is a good interpretation, a fool or a stranger will end up doing a lot of harm to everyone around them. Let me repeat that because it is very different from what I just read to you. But from the Hebrew, it is more accurate. Anyone who hires a fool. So, you are an employer. You want your employee to be who? A believer or an unbeliever? Mas namigid kung kilala sila sa Ginoo. Kaya kung wala kilala sila sa Ginoo, they are by definition a fool. And it is dangerous. When you hire a fool, it may not go well for you. You will harm many people. Amomam are given a second category. If you hire a stranger, ang mga tao wala kilala mo. If you hire someone you do not know, you're not sure what you're getting, and there's a good chance it may not end well. And the thought is very simple. We want to make sure that the people who are working for us, if we have people working for us, if we are a boss, if we have any kind of authority in hiring, this would apply. We want to make sure they are, as much as we can, Christians. Why? Because we know they're not going to work for us. They're going to work for Jesus. And that's going to make them a much better employee than anyone the world will ever give to us. Amoman, you be careful of a stranger because you don't know what the morals or the value of a stranger are. You don't know if they are going to be buot o kon pasuay. You're not sure. And that's where you get into a lot of trouble. I've known business owners who have gotten themselves into a great deal of problems because they end up getting employees who are thieving, employees who steal, employees who lie because they don't have a godly character to them. Now you might ask the balance. Shouldn't, though, we be a good example and maybe hire people who aren't Christians to be able to share our faith with them? Be careful. Can you do that? Yes. Should you do that? Oh, if the Lord tells you to only. Because mind you, when you hire non-Christians, know what you are getting. Their character and their morals are not going to come from the Lord, and there's a very good chance, not a guarantee, but a very good chance, they will harm a lot of people by what they do and say. So Solomon, giving wisdom, don't hire a fool if you have a choice. And be careful because they always go back to their sin. Look at verse 11. The seventh thing we notice about these fools is they like to go back to their sin. It's a verse we all probably should be familiar with. For as a dog returns, nabalik, sa yesuga, back to his vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. Now, the reason why this is such a famous proverb is because Peter quotes this in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 22. And he gives us some context for it, by the way, more so than Solomon or Hezekiah, who recorded this, does for us. It speaks of may sa katao, Diyos non sila sa nagliga. They were a Christian. They were someone who was living for the Lord, following after Jesus. Pero ilapinsan na lang mas namin kon ara ko sa kalibutan. Man, it was better back in the world. It was better back before I was saved. I liked my life before Jesus better than now. It was more sadya, mas sadyagid. It was a better time. So as a dog returns to its vomit, by the way, disgusting, revolting, but very true analogy. If you've ever had a dog, you know this. Kung may sakay do, konsuko sila, ano sila dayon? Kaon. You think about common sense. If you're barfing it out, your body's saying it's not good. You don't want that. The dog goes, well, maybe the second time it'll be better. Who knows? Give it a try. And so the dog goes back, because the dog's not very smart. Dogs are not very, hindi ka alam sa ila. Don't be like the dog. God saved us out of the world. He redeemed us from our sin. He gave us a new life in Jesus Christ. The problem is we tend to look back and only remember the good, not the bad. I remember the party, kasajigid. I forget about the hangover the next morning when I had his pounding and I'm hurled over a toilet bowl and dumping all my contents of my stomach. I don't remember that as well. And that's the dilemma is we tend to look at the good, forget the bad, and we look back and think maybe the world was better. It's not. Do not return to the vomit. Don't go back to your wicked old ways, for it is a fool who says that the foolishness that he came out of is something ever worth going back to. That brings us to the eighth thing we want to notice in verse 12. For the eighth and final thing that we're given in regards to these fools is there's something worse than a fool. For look, we read, do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There's more hope for a fool than for him. I'll stop right there because that's a powerful statement. Solomon is saying, after all of that he said about a fool, what does he say about a fool? They're untrustworthy. They're useless. Don't hire them. Leave them alone. They go back to their vomit. I mean, these are dumb people. Whatever it is, a fool is bad, but there's something worse. What's worse than a fool? Ang mga tao, ila pinsar, kaalam sa ila. The one who thinks he's wise is worse off than a fool. Why? Because better to know I'm a fool than to deceive myself and think that somehow I am not. Think how somehow I am wise. I got to tell you, this is the world today. We see this everywhere we go. Ang mga tao sa kalibutan, ang pinsar nila kaalam gid sa ila. They think they're so wise because they have their degrees, they have their education. People who have their doctorates, their PhDs, their professors. They're the guys in charge. They're the ones in leadership. They're the ones who are teaching at UP, all the best universities. They are wisdom. They are the mighty. They're worse than fools. Because they deceive themselves and they deceive others by thinking that somehow in their wisdom they are better, brighter, smarter than God who made them. Go back to Romans chapter 1, verse 22. Professing to be wise, they become fools. And far worse, because they're blinded and don't even know it. So it is far worse to think you are wise than at least recognize you're a fool, because maybe if you recognize it, there's hope that you'll turn to Jesus Christ. But that brings us to the second major section we want to look at this evening. Having addressed fools, Solomon is going to go on and address the lazy, ang mga tamaran. He doesn't have much to say about them, but he does humorously give us three things. And I think all three of them are pretty humorous, by the way. I think Solomon, when he talked about fools, had a bit of a smile on his face because he uses some colorful illustrations to be sure. Notice the first one, a fool doesn't have any excuse. There in verse 13. For the lazy man, tama nga tao. The lazy man says, there's a lion in the road, a fierce lion in the streets. Now, the idea, by the way, I don't know if you saw the little post I put out there earlier. I was cracking up when I saw that. Guy on the streets, big lion out in front of him with a sign that says church behind him. He's going, no, don't go to church. There's a lion out there. The idea is simple. We always have excuses. And the lazy always have a reason why they do not do what they should be doing. And the excuse is outrageous normally. It makes no sense. There's a lion in the street. Now, mind you, it is worth noting, this is the second time in Proverbs we've had this exact same proverb given to us. The first time we saw it was back in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 13. This is repeated. It's very similar, but there's one difference. Yes, the lazy man has the excuse, may leon sa sagwa. But this one adds, gutom siya. He's hungry because he's roaring. He's out there looking for food. So it makes it a little more severe. But what this speaks to me is that in the days of Solomon, people had bad excuses for why they didn't do what they were supposed to do. There's a lion outside. 300 years later, in the days of Hezekiah, they were still using the same bad excuse. Which tells us people are not very creative. They just go back to the same rather rote, rather well-used excuses that everybody knows are not true. In fact, the only person deceived by excuses that we give is us. We might convince ourselves that the reason why we do not do what we know we're supposed to do, be that going to church, reading our Bible, praying, whatever the Lord's putting on our heart, whatever it is we know we're supposed to do, whatever diligent act we're supposed to follow after, we may give ourselves reasons why we don't do it and convince ourselves, but we do not convince anyone else. We certainly do not convince God. Any more than if I told you, que delicado, kay may leon sa sagwa. Bad excuses are always what lazy men use. And the reason why is because they're unwilling to look. Look at verses 14 and 15. Again, humorous illustrations. As a door turns upon its hinge, so does a lazy man in his bed. Let me give you the picture. Kung may portahan, tiyog-tiyog na lang, it goes in and out, right? But it doesn't ever go anywhere. It just stays in the same place. Never goes forward, never goes backwards, it just moves back and forth. Amo man sa mga tamo nga tao. Ara sila, higda sila katray, they're laying in their bed, liso-liso lang, they go back and forth, but are too lazy to ever even move. They never get up, they never go forward because, well, they're lazy. In fact, that lazy man is so lazy, he buries his hand in a bowl, and he's too tired to pick it back up and bring the food into his mouth. I think that's hysterical. So get the idea, gutom, get siya. Okay, ang kaon ako, I'm gonna eat. Hand goes in the bowl. Kapoy na ko. It's too much effort to bring that back. Can someone come feed me? Could you put the food in my mouth, please? Jen does that to me once in a while, by the way. Bless her heart. It's not because I'm lazy. She's just a sweetheart. I'll be sitting there doing something, and she's like sticking food in my mouth. I'm going, this is not so bad. I kind of like this, some pomelo or whatever she's, she makes sure it's good food. She never puts candy in my mouth. She didn't put brownies. I put brownies in my mouth. She won't put brownies in my mouth. She puts pomelo in my mouth and healthy food and carrots and cucumbers and what might have you. But the idea is simple. You're just so lazy. You stick your hand in the bowl. You won't even pull it back out for the sake of eating. Yet, God calls us to work. This is the contrast. Go back to the book of Genesis. When Adam was there in the Garden of Eden, before sin ever came into the world, God put him there to work. He said, by your sweat, you're going to go out, you're going to do your labor. This is prior to sin. You're going to tend the garden, you're going to take care of the animals. It was always God's plan that we work. The curse is not work, by the way. Let me clarify this. We might think we're cursed because we have to work. No, work was always God's intention. The curse is we work and it doesn't provide. Let me rewind and clarify this because I'll tell you this is an important truth. God always intended us to work. That is always from the beginning part of His perfect plan. It is not cursing us that caused us to have to go to work. The curse was you will go and you will put seeds in the ground. You will dig by the sweat of your brow. You're going to have to sow. But what's going to come out? Thorns and thistles, not fruit. You will work, but it will not provide. That's the curse. Now, the good news is that God promises to take care of us. Go back to Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, Luke chapter 12, verse 32. Ang promesa sanggino para sa aton, He does take care of our needs. We can't, He does. That doesn't mean we don't work. For Paul would say in the book of 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10, if you do not work, hindi makaon, you do not eat. Therefore, it is always God's intention that we are busy. We are to be out and diligent. We are called to work. We do not, liso-lisa sa katri. We don't go back and forth on bed. We don't stick our hand in a bowl and ask someone else to pull it out for us. We are called to be diligent as we follow and serve the Lord. But the problem is, The lazy are arrogant. Look sa katapusan ng verse 16. For a lazy man, ipinsa na lang, is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. Now let me clarify what he's talking about. The 7 men literally are men who have stuck their hand in the bowl that's carrying off the previous verse and have tasted what's inside of it. They were not lazy. They were willing to go down and get the chips or the whatever's in the bowl and take it and eat it. And they can tell you, ano sabor na? It tastes like this. I know because I tried it. The lazy man thinks, mas kaalam ko kampara sa ila. I'm wiser than they are. No, I didn't eat the food, but I'll tell you what it tastes like. How? How can you tell me if you've never tried it? How can you think you are wiser than 7 men who have experienced it? Because a lazy man is arrogant. Have you ever known somebody, makilala, iban sa mga tao, that you know, tamaranggit sa ila. But any question you ask them, dasigit ila sabat. They know it. They know exactly about it. They know everything about that. Hey, how does that taste? I'll tell you how that tastes. What does that look like? I'll tell you what that looks like. And you're going, how do you know all of this? You've never done any of this. How can you have experienced this? How can you give wisdom concerning this if you've never actually been a part of it? Because of arrogance. They think they know it all in their own eyes. They are very wise, though they've never actually done it. And we live in a day and an age when this is amplified by one thing: Google. They've never done it, but I've Googled it. I've read the reviews. I've looked up the information. I have Wikipedia, and I can look up and I can tell you everything about that. And you're going, well, that's wonderful. But if you've never experienced it, do you really have wisdom regarding it? Do not listen to the lazy. Do not listen to the arrogant. Wisdom says the wise man is the one who's done it. Therefore, don't be lazy. But that brings us to the third and final section that we want to look at this evening. In verses 17 through 28, we've talked about wisdom regarding the fools and wisdom regarding the lazy. Pero sa katapusan, quite conveniently broken into a third section, is wisdom with our words. Now, the first thing we want as far as our wisdom is, don't get into fights you don't need to. Look at verse 17. For he who passes by and meddles in a quarrel that is not his own is like one who takes a dog by the ears. I don't know how many dogs you have messed with in your time around, but one thing you learn very quickly when it comes to dogs, don't pull their ears. If you want to get a dog very angry, very quickly, walk up, yank its ear. It will bite you. That's the idea. If you get involved in an argument that you have no part of, you are pulling a dog's ears, you're going to get bit. When Paul and Barnabas, and I love this example, had a dispute back in the book of Acts chapter 15. Akig sila dua. Ang problema na lang is, ang nablos ni Barnabas, his name was Mark. The same Mark, by the way, who wrote Duga-Duga, the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark. It is the same Mark. Pero bata pa siya, he was not very mature. And he had not continued. He'd gone on the first missionary journey, pero nakalin. He left early. And so when the second journey came around, ang gusto si Barnabas, nakapotsa naman. Bring Mark with us again. Ang sabat ni Pablo, hindi pwede gid. Nope. Mark was unfaithful. He didn't stay around. I will not take him a second time. Akid gid sila duwa. They both began to argue over this. So heated was their debate, they split ways. Barnabas and Paul, the first missionary duo of the early church, the ones who established all of the churches there in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, they broke ways. What did the church in Antioch have to say about this? Their church, their home church. Ano sa mga tao sa ila simbahan? They commended them both to the grace of God. Acts chapter 15, verse 40, ang duwa sila, hatag sila sa Ginoo. We're not taking sides. We're not going to get involved with your dispute. You guys, take it to the Lord. And I got to say, that is great wisdom. If we are not personally involved in a problem, if we are not being asked our opinion, and even sometimes maybe when we are, wisdom is not to try to get involved. Why would we think we are the answer? Why do we think we need to interject ourselves into other people's lives? Who am I to think that I am your answer or your solution? If you want the wisdom, I just simply say, hey, take it to the Lord. Take it to God, take it to Jesus, because I don't want to put myself in the middle, because I know I might get bit. Do a favor, don't get involved in arguments that we are not a part of. And don't joke around. Look at verses 18 through 19. Solomon says, like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is a man who deceives his neighbor and says, joke lang. Just kidding around. Didn't mean that. That wasn't serious. I'm just joking. And the picture is really it's quite dramatic. If you have someone who makes jokes, makes fun of, says bad, gets gossip around his neighbor, it's the equivalent of someone who's taking flaming arrows and just randomly shooting them at people all around him. Very deadly, very dangerous. You're going to do harm to somebody, guaranteed. And that's the idea. To say, I'm just joking, you are going to hurt somebody. Be very careful, because words matter. I promise you, if I asked you, do you remember what someone said to you when you were a child that hurt you? Every one of you would have a story. And you're going, well, some of us, that's been quite a lot of time. I mean, I can think back, it's been 40, 45 years. I'm 50 years old, so I can go back 40 or 45 years, and I can remember when someone said something mean to me, I still remember, and sakit pa. It still hurts. Because words don't heal. And the wounds that they bring, man, they can be deep. So we need to be very cautious and very careful what we say, and certainly not lighthearted and say, oh, just joking. Yeah, I didn't mean to say you're biskana no lang. What insult we throw out there. I was just joking. No, we're wounding is what we're doing. We're damaging people's lives. That's why Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 tells us, do not let any corrupt communication come out of your mouth. Only that which imparts grace to the hearer. Be very careful with what we say, because we don't want to start fires. Look at verses 20 through 21. Where there is no wood, a fire goes out. Where there is no gossip, strife ceases. For as charcoal is to burning, as wood is to fire, so is a contentious man to kindling flames. So the picture is powerful. If you don't have wood, you won't have a fire. Take away the fuel, the fire goes out. In the same way, if you stop gossiping, there will not be any strife. There's not going to be any conflicts. It's going to make things calm. Kalmagid sa aton kabuhi. In the same way, when you take away coal, when you take away fire, if you take away someone who's argumentative, that causes conflicts to cease. We're given two sources, by the way. Two different things that can cause conflict in our lives. The first one is gossip. If we are involved, pamati na lang, if we are willing to listen to others when they gossip, it will cause conflicts. If we give time to others when they want to argue, if we give them a response when they want to come to us and complain, we will cause more and greater problems and conflicts to arise. And so the simple solution is stop listening. Don't come around. When someone has that marites, that latest kucho na lang, whatever gossip might be, it's so tempting, you really want to hear it, stop. Because listening causes things to get worse. It causes conflicts to increase. When that person comes up and wants to argue and debate and be angry about something, don't give them the time of day. Because when you take away the fuel, when you take away the wood, when you take away the coal, the arguments stop. Stop listening. You stop the arguments. And for sure, do not gossip. Look at verses 22 through 23. For the words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles, but they go down into the innermost part of your body. Fervent lips with a wicked heart are like earthenware covered with silver dross. Now let me break this down because both of those are powerful statements. Una again, ang chismis, the marites na lang, that gossip, it is so tempting to want to listen to it. I watch, and by the way, I can see it. Someone comes in, they're over in the corner, and you can hear the conversation start. Did you hear? Suddenly there's a group of people around them. It's like, wow, that was fast. How did they even get over that? That was really quick. I mean, they were this side of the room, now they're on that side of the room, and there's a group of them now. That was really amazing. And you're going, why are they over there so fast? It's just like if you put out brownies. You put out a tray of brownies, it's amazing. From one side of the room to the other, everybody flocks, and before you know it, there's just a group of people. They're carnivorous. They're just devouring everything in sight. That's gossip. It looks so amazing. It seems like it's so tasty, but don't miss what it does. It sinks down into your heart. Much like that unhealthy food, that brownie or that fast food goes down in, gives you cholesterol, hardens your heart, so does gossip. Gossip is deadly to the person who consumes it, and that's the idea. Be very careful of gossip, and be careful of the one who gives it, because fervent lips, literally, a mouth that's on fire. I've seen this too. When someone has that latest bit of juicy piece of gossip, whatever that is, whatever the latest thing that just happened, it's like they can't help but tell others. It's like their tongue is on fire, their mouth is on fire. They got to spit it out and let everybody know what it is that they've just heard. Be careful about those flaming lips that want to spit out the latest gossip, because it's like a glaze over a clay jar. Literally what this is saying. Let me give you the imagery. Kanami sa tsura sa sagwa, pero sa sulod, duta na lang. It's dirt. And here's the problem. Why do we love gossip? There's not a question that we do, by the way. I'm not picking on anybody in particular. If this speaks to you, let the Lord do what He wants to do. But we do, is in general, love gossip. You know, Jen sometimes will make a comment to me. And Jen's not a gossiper, to be very clear. Be very, very clear on that. I've had my brownies, I'm safe. But if there's something going on, it's just, did you want to hear what's taking place? Whether something she saw on Facebook or whatever. Half the time I'm thinking, I don't know that I want to know. Because if I want to know, I might have to do something about it. I think I prefer being ignorant. It's much easier. But there is that side of you that always, when you hear, do you want to know this? You're like, yeah, I kind of do. You know, what's the latest and the greatest? What is happening? Why are we like that? What causes us to have such a desire for bad news? For gossip is never good news. You will never hear someone gossip. Man, there was this person, they were reading their Bible the other day and they were having such a great time with the Lord. That's not gossip. No one's ever going to spread that like gossip. You're never going to hear a gossip go, you know, I saw the other day this person was praying to Jesus and you could just tell they were in the Spirit and loving the Lord. That's not gossip. What's gossip? Did you hear so-and-so did this? Oh my. That's gossip. Why are we so hungry for it? Because it makes us feel like we are better, the glaze on the outside, and forget who we really are, filthy dirt. It's a way to try to make us feel better by looking down upon others. Be so very careful of gossip. It will harden the heart. Watch out for those who have the flaming lips. You do not want to give them the time of day. It's not worth it. Love says, by the way, go back to Proverbs 10:12. Love says to cover sin, not gossip about it. But that brings us to a fifth thing we want to notice regarding our words, and that's to be careful of hatred. And as I got the pusan, all the way from verses 24 through 28, we're going to deal with this final topic. For we read in verse 24, he who hates disguises it with his lips. He lays up deceit within himself. When he speaks kindly, do not believe him, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Though his hatred is covered by deceit, his wickedness will be revealed before the assembly. So breaking it down. Ang mga tao, kung akigid sila, their hatred in their heart. They do not like us. That isn't something they will necessarily tell us. They will lie to cover what is inside of them. They will have pleasant words. They will give us gracious words, even though internally they despise us. Therefore, please, and it is an imploring please, please do not listen to them. Please do not give them attention. Because if you are not careful, they will harm you, they will hurt you. Instead, make sure that you come before the congregation. Come to church, for in the assembly of the saints, that's when their true motive will be revealed. And I like this. Because we do not know what someone else is thinking. We cannot see. Hindi pa makita, tigipon sa mga tao. But though we cannot see the heart of others, it becomes much more difficult for them to lie to us in a corporate setting amongst the congregation. It is easy for one man to be deceived. It is much harder to deceive many. And so the idea is, and this is one of the reasons why church is so powerful and is so important for us as believers, is it keeps us safe from those who have a bad heart, an ill motive, those who want to take advantage of us. Be wary, be careful of those who have pleasant words. Because you do not know what's in their heart and it may not be good. Let the church expose them. Because flattery is dangerous. Look at verse 28. We'll go back to 27 in a minute. But look at verse 28. A lying tongue hates those who are crushed by it, and flattering mouths work ruin. So if someone has hatred in their heart, how do you know? You don't. Not right away, not real fast. What do you need to be cautious of though? Those who have a tongue who gives flattering words. Listen, if people are only saying good things about you, it's usually one of two things in life. A, they're trying to sell you something. Because salesmen, they have lots of flattering words, and it's just because they want to make a business out of you. They're trying to get money from you. B, they're setting you up. Because likely it's not genuine, it's not real. Because a true friend, a good friend, a godly friend does not flatter. They tell us the truth. And that's the kind of person you want around you. Go back to Proverbs 27:6. As iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. We want those people who are going to be honest with us about our lives. I don't want someone saying, "Aka namin gits ima pastor buot ka." No, I'm not. I'm a sinner. And I'll prove it to you if you give me half a chance. And I would rather someone be honest with me so that I can improve my relationship with God, correct what's difficult or off in my life, than someone who just flowers me with flattery. Do not follow, do not trust those who only give flattering words. But no, sa katapusan, what goes around comes around. Look at verse 27. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. And he who rolls a stone will have it roll back on him. So carry this together. We don't know what's in someone's heart. We don't know if someone likes us or hates us, although be very careful of flattering words. But know this, a person who has the wrong motive, it will come back to bite them. If they're digging a ditch to try to trap us, sila madagdag, they're going to fall in. If they're trying to roll a stone to try to see if they can't harm us, it's going to roll back and hurt them. Why? Because God is the one who protects us. God is the one who watches out for us. There was a man named Haman. Now, by the way, I should tell you, anytime from a Jewish perspective you hear the word Haman, you are to say boo afterwards. That is required, by the way. It is just it's a Jewish thing. They hate Haman. If you say the word Haman, the next thing is boo. She's got to say that. Haman. Very good. Yes, Haman's a bad guy. Haman hated a man named Mordecai. Mordecai, pagkaisa ni Esther, was the cousin of Esther. Because the problem was that Haman thought he was important. Haman thought he was someone very powerful. I like the boo there. That was nice. But Mordecai refused to bow before a man. Mordecai would only bow to the Lord. Therefore, Haman, thank you, he set up a gallows to hang, to put Mordecai to death. And that gallows that he set up, the whole thing that he thought he would use to execute his enemy, ended up becoming the gallows that he himself was hung on. Haman died on the gallows he set up for Mordecai. The pit that he dug, he fell into. The rock that he set, he rolled back on him. Why? Because God is the one who protects us. We don't worry about what's in people's heart. We don't worry about what people say, because we know ultimately our faith is not in man. Our faith is in God, and He is the one who keeps us safe. But the wisdom is be careful of the flowery, flattering words of men. All right, let's pray. Salaam alaikum para sinigabi. Father, we just thank you for the time to gather together tonight and be able to spend some time in your word, Lord. And we just thank you for the wisdom you give to us, Lord. It is timeless wisdom. I think that's the most beautiful of all things. Lord, what you wrote through Solomon 3,000 years ago was just as true in the days of Hezekiah, as he was even repeating some of the Proverbs, because he saw the same thing in his day. What a diferencia. Lord, there's still that same wisdom today in how we interact with those who do not know you, those who are fools. We don't put our confidence there. We don't put our trust in them. We don't hire them because, well, they're going to ultimately probably just end up hurting. Lord, and how we deal with laziness, how we deal with our mouth, our lips, our words. Lord, just help us to hold on, to grasp these truths, to grasp these wisdom, because it is life. It is how we practically can be more effective in following you every day. So Lord, let us hold fast to your truth, fast to your word, hold on fast to your wisdom. So we thank you, we praise you. In Jesus' name we say, Amen. Main gabi.